Stuart Higgs, thanks for joining us for today's podcast. I feel like I should give you an official introduction, but I think if you're a fan of BSB racing and Superbike racing, then I'm sure people will know who you are. But if you don't, this is the series and race director for the Bennetts BSB Championship. Stuart, first off, how are you and sort of how are things going at BSB HQ? Is planning well underway for hopefully a normal-ish season this year?
BSB HQ has had a burst water pipe, so I've had to sort of decamp to the spare room. Look, our chins are up because there's no alternative. They've got to be up. I mean, it is slightly Groundhog Day. I think in reality, everyone is feeling perhaps that lockdown version 3 or whatever it is we're in now was, while some restrictions would have been foreseen, I think the depth of the restrictions is perhaps more than most people thought there would be perhaps in October when, there was a semblance of normality. But, this is a vicious, savage disease, and the consequences of it are wide-reaching. So I think, we've got to be grateful that there's things that are going well now. Obviously, the vaccine rollout is going very well, it would appear. And I think that is the path out of this. And I think all of us, particularly in we're in this hospitality, leisure and sport sector, we are holding our breath for, what will elude as the roadmap on the 22nd of February. But I think, it's like anything, we've got to keep measured and not immediately assume it's going to be a green light for everything. And do what we did last time. I mean, if last year served as a good training session, it taught us to really explore all the possible options to keep everybody informed as much as we can, take decisions together and really understand the effect of decisions we take and not do things prematurely and go down a path of no return where you don't particularly have faith in something, but you're going to do it anyway and, incur cost and inconvenience of which that will be potentially much more damaging than any other time. So lots of caution, but lots of resilience. There's lots of, it's going through the motions. Some of it is overcautious, but I'd rather have every scenario catered for and be able to sort of apply the direction to the path that is the most obvious one when we can make that call. And but the ambition is still there. We obviously already have taken a pretty safe course of action with the first race event being quite late in the year, almost in June essentially, and that still would point towards being a realistic ambition. So no reason to change that for the moment.
And in terms of like the cautious start to the season, we're looking at a test period, aren't we? Starting, I think it's April at Donington Park, and that's the sort of plan to, I guess, when we first see some Superbikes on track this year, won't it?
Yeah, I mean, some incidental things have happened. Obviously, collectively as a championship, we all decided it wouldn't be a particularly good idea to go to Spain for testing in 2021 for not just COVID. There's obviously the obvious reason. But, I think it's still the right thing to do. And, cost of testing is a massive part of budgets, and you don't see an immediate return for that, if any at all in some cases. So having a much longer timeline into the first race event, it's allowed us to do what may well be a blueprint for the future anyway, and having a series of test tour events, as we're calling them, that will give everybody a good chunk of track time on circuits that are obviously relevant to the championship. It's all very well going to ref testing, and you get you feel good that you're on a Grand Prix standard track that you've seen many times and many other races, but it's got to be relevant, and this will be a good test again of the systems, if there are continuous or modified procedures to how we have to operate as a championship in terms of how to mitigate the risk of the spread of COVID. And a few things have changed. Obviously, there's new variants and things like that. There's other things have been slightly more relaxed, and other things have stayed the same. So understanding exactly what we need to do in the sporting environment will be very keen. We're going to have the best part of, I think, sort of 6 or 7 days testing in terms of all the events together to put that into place. And so when it comes to the first race event, which obviously is planned at the end of May, we'd had a good run at it. And obviously, in the case of at least 2 of the first 3 rounds, we would have tested at the same tracks that we're going to race at. So it gives us a great opportunity to meet with the local environmental health people, who I'm sure will have a stake in some of the decisions and help us with how to manage events as they did in 2020. And so that being able to do this at a test event is a far less pressurized environment than a race event. So that's another reason we're doing this.
I'm just looking at the calendar here I can see out my window, it's raining really heavily. I can see some welcome additions to the calendar this year. I'm looking at Cadwell Park on August the 20th and some other circuits that obviously were absent last year. What's some of the thinking in terms of the calendar this year? We've got 11 rounds, 3 races at each, haven't we?
Well, again, Assen was the first event to be removed from the 2020 calendar, and much of the same reason. Obviously, it's complicated enough in the UK. You've even got 2 obviously governmental agencies in terms of the English side and the Scottish side of the border will be doing things slightly differently. So that's one variation, and we don't really need to be going and understanding what a province in Northern Holland's doing. And yes, there's obviously the whole thing of Brexit's changed things, and it's just we can deal with one thing at a time. We don't need to be complicated with the other things. If there is some calendar movement, obviously it's a big chunk of time, the Assen event. So it just takes away an event of some degree of logistic challenge and financial challenge. So we're just giving ourselves the best opportunity. But then scaling back, one of the lessons and the outcomes of the 2020 season was the 3 race format. And I think certainly it gave an injection of energy to the events. It obviously a lot of points on the board. And ultimately, when we're at a track, and you do see things more differently when you're presented with the problems and the challenges you will face, then you want to maximise the time that you're there with the sharp end of the content. I mean, in a regular season, in a time long before COVID, you would arrive on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and it seems almost incomprehensible now that you would be there on your 4th or 5th day of being at the same racetrack. You actually see a BSB race.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, you can now see even in Formula One, they're talking about doing some pilot events where qualifying is going to be replaced by a sprint race on the Saturday. But I mean, what we've actually done, obviously conscious of just piling on track time, obviously just by redefining the track time, working out what's actually needed and consumption requirements, material requirements, and staff requirements, is that, we skimmed it down very much last year, just having a single session on the Friday. Almost unanimously, everybody wanted 2 sessions back on the Friday to give the best chance of getting deep into the weekend with a direction of travel for setup, but actually making those sessions a little bit shorter. So just by like 10 minutes or so about 2 40-minute sessions on the Friday at reasonably relevant times to when the race events are. So again, the whole ambient temperature, things like that, people are actually doing free practice at a time which is relevant to the race times, which is an important thing. And then a much shorter free practice on the Saturday morning, essentially a glorified warm-up, just to dial in for the rest of the day. And then a revised qualifying format that actually would have started earlier in the weekend. That those free practices on the Friday, as well as being obviously the first time to set the direction of travel for setup, they will carry validity for establishing the starting grid, at least by the fastest 12 from day 1 will directly graduate to Q2, which will be the lunchtime second part of qualifying. 2 qualifying sessions, 12 minutes each, short and sharp. Everyone in Q1 except for the direct 12 graduates, and then I think the first 6, if memory serves, it's been so long since I wrote the rule that I've actually forgotten. The first 6, I'm pretty sure, from Q1 will join the previous 12 from the Friday practice. and then they'll go for the 12 minutes. But obviously, the fascinating thing is obviously there's slightly variable weather conditions. Is that the guys in Q1 would have had some experience of the track, and they'll be straight into it with some experience of what's happened. And then the direct graduates from the Friday would have had the early morning free practice 3, as it would be now. And they're straight into qualifying. So that's going to add a bit of dynamic. So it gives us a nice story for Friday that, the story of the weekend is becoming known. Using the tyre allocation as well, also being a bit more drilled down in terms of the detail on that. It's 8 sets for the weekend, but it's a maximum of 3 sets for the Friday. So you don't just get into a tyre war on the Friday. If someone's having a struggle and just going, look, we just got to boom some soft tyres in to get us out of trouble, to get us into the next day. No, it's going to be a level playing field, 3 sets on the Friday, and then the rest of the tyre allocation is handed out on the Saturday. And the guys that have to do the extra qualifying session will get an extra set of tyres. So if you're in Q1 and you graduate, you get an extra set, so you're at no disadvantage to the guys in Q2.
Brilliant. I was talking to some of the riders last year about the 3 races a weekend, and I was thinking they must be knackered physically at the end of the weekend, and they're all fit as a fiddle, but they said actually it was sort of the mental tiredness, getting yourself prepped for every race, the sort of the routines they go through, that said it was a real big sort of challenge for them to get their head around, because every race they go through their start procedures and on the grid, and it's all the emotions that they're going through there. They said actually that's a big factor as well as a physical factor to their race weekend. I guess one other thing to touch on in terms of the formats and sort of structure of this year is the Showdown, because this year we're moving from 6 riders in the final Showdown to 8, aren't we? And there's just a couple more tweaks that there's been made to the Showdown.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, obviously, everyone has made the obvious point that in the 2020 season, it was really closed down to the final races without a Showdown format. And yeah, would exactly be the situation that we expected when you're dealing with 6 events, 3 races, 18 rounds. You can go back over many, many years of the championship, and the position after 18 point scoring races is the season is still relatively condensed. But as maths and series evolves across the rest of the season, the gaps get bigger, and any linear format of most motorsports, it's pretty unlikely you get a big pack of people all within a points range. There might be a just about mathematical, but a real kind of points range to make a big shot at the title is long gone for most people. But it's very much setting the scene at the start of the year. We have a grid of 28 riders is on the provisional entry list, coming from 18 teams. Now, you could talk to, I would suggest, probably at least 14 of the 18 teams and ask them for their aspirations for the year. I think at least 14 of those teams would say, we want to shoot for the top 6, or in this case, this year, the top 8. And it's not an unrealistic aspiration. And that's the reason for doing it. The format of the competition gives that as a something to aim for, also for riders. And without it, you ask the same question: what you're hoping for? Well, okay, we're hoping to be maybe top 6 or top 8 at the end of the year, but that kind of loses its kind of importance and its relevance, because once you're in that P6 to P8 range, certainly just outside of the last phase of the championship, the emphasis changes. There's always going to be a kind of a group that kind of perhaps establishes regular form and gets their ticket in the final phase before others, which is good. That's what happens in most seasons. But the real dogfight that exists from, say, P4 even up to P12 and more than that is a great story for the championships. It's a great phase of the championships. The focus of the events and the broadcast and the chatter and the build up to the events is distributed much greater than it would be in a series where you're just always focusing on the front. And yeah, it's all very well in a purist point of view to say, if someone wins it with 2 races to go, they deserve it, blah blah blah. Yeah, they're probably right. But this is the reality we live in, that events and competitions where the outcome and the final determination is made before the end of the competition, they simply sink in terms of their attractiveness as events and interest. And that's just the fact. And sorry, but, you know, that's not a viable possibility or option that we wish to have for the Bennetts British Superbike Championship. We want the outcome of the competition to be determined on the final day of it. As I've often said, you know, in the Wimbledon tennis tournament, the trophy isn't lifted on the second Wednesday. It's the Sunday. That's when the competition ends. So having motorsport does suffer in some ways. It's a very long season and having a very linear format of everything being equal. Yes, it's all very well and does deliver a worthy champion in that format, but I don't think anyone can say that a champion that's established using the format that we've got is any less worthy. And you know, using the podium point system, value of those. I mean, championships have been lost and won certainly in the last 2 or 3 years. You know, Reading on Brooks was a 5-point margin at the end of the year, and Brooks crashed in the last race before the showdown at Alton, which was a 5-point giveaway in terms of podium points. You know, Brooks again, I think was only 3 points off of Shane Byrne in the year that has them crashed on the final day. So the points permutations are very interesting. Now the move from 6 to 8, because you know, there is a, you know, you could argue at the end if you're 7th in the championship and you were really, really close to 6, 5 and 4, you know, after the final 2/3 of the championship, should you still really have much more to gain in terms of a finish of year position? Debatable, but perhaps. And so by going from 6 to 8, we're saying, okay, the championship competitiveness is as good as ever. Having much more point scoring races that form the main season. I think, you know, we're talking obviously, is it 8 races, 24 races, point scoring races over 8 events will form the first part of the championship. So to have 24 races, there could be lots more people potentially with getting on the podium, and therefore, if we've got more people with podium points, that's the kind of the incentive that it's the podium points that count towards the final phase. So increase it from 6 to 8. So we think it's a reasonable balance, but it does define our championship. And we know. Love it or hate it, it's the Marmite subject, and we first introduced this thing in 2010. We're still droning on about it in 2021, and for good reasons. Yeah. But you know, so I'm a bit of I am an advocate of it, but I'm also a purist, and I get the argument, but I think on balance the showdown format wins.
And it was this time last year, we were actually in London at the Shard seeing Paul Bird reveal his bikes and riders for the year. It feels a long time ago now, but how sort of happy are you with the grid this year? To me, it looks stronger than ever. And in a year that, you know, with maybe financial difficulties and sponsors, you know, maybe not being able to commit as much as they used to, it's really good to see it in that shape, I think.
No, 100%. I mean, it is remarkable, as you say, Chris. I mean, COVID was this thing you heard it on the odd news bulletin, and you just genuinely didn't think it was going to be anything on your radar. I think we would take, you know, any other news item, you know, would be more of a threat. You know, when there's been a terrorist attack, you suddenly think, oh my goodness, what if that happened in and around an event, or some even moreover a weather catastrophe that, you know, this was seemed a million miles away. So to think, you know, the mindset we were in on Feb 17 2020 was completely different to where we are now. But absolutely the teams and the partners of the teams have been incredible. I mean, and it completely vindicates the decision to push on with the 2020 championship, to give the visibility and everything that we needed. It certainly created the momentum that's carried us thus far. There's still some way to go, but as I say, the message to all of them, and everyone is working tremendously hard. We're talking to everybody every single day. about multiple subjects, and everyone's chins up. And I think again, not having to worry about doing what everyone else is doing and running off to Spain to go testing has definitely given people some relief. Obviously, where teams are run out of business environments, obviously the furlough schemers, I'm sure, help some teams with their internal arrangements. There's not as much pressure to do certain things in a certain time frame. And when we go testing in the UK, that's just going to be a far easier thing. But going back to how we've structured the championship on face value, say 33 races. Well, you've pushed everything up. But again, this is it was quite a calculated thing in looking at the track time that was the previous case in a regular 2019 season of 3 full 45-minute practice sessions, a 3-stage qualifying format where there was a triple header. The Saturday race was full length, 20-minute warm-ups on the Sunday. We've actually nibbled a bit from certainly the practice sessions, and across the entire year now, there's actually the best part of, I think it's about 8 hours track time less with the current format as to the old format. Obviously, we take a complete round out as well. So on a just a pure track time situation, obviously appreciating that people aren't circulating for every minute of every single session, but I think it's going to come in a little bit under. I think that's the calculation, that it isn't and won't be a burden on resources, but it's converting the and this is the thing for the teams, converting the time limit events and the track time into the most valuable and promotable element of it. Races, of course, by definition, are far more interesting and promotable than practice sessions, and by also making the practice sessions count in more validity, as the Friday ones will do, that will have a value. We'll see, I'm sure, quite lots more media traffic on the story of the weekend from the Friday situation, a different quali format, which will be short, sharp, and bang, and then we're into racing. And the story of the weekend, and obviously having races split over 2 days, variable weather conditions and other things. Someone has a disastrous first day, they've got the next two races to pull it back, or you get a surprise winner on day one. Can they convert that to more success on day two? So I think that's again just adding all the time to the value that the sponsors and the partners of the teams can have without unnecessarily burdening the teams with extra cost. And racing is what we talk about, and the more racing we do, the more we can talk about it. The more we talk about it, the more the championship is valued.
I guess touching on sponsorship and sponsorship deals, we're really pleased, obviously, to announce that Bennetts are on board for another 2 seasons. Just how significant is that for the championship?
Well, it's most significant that I've not got to go to Dainese and get about 200 more shirts done with a new logo. So I'm delighted that everything's staying the same, because in these challenging times, it means we don't have to do a branding refresh. So, no, but seriously, it's great and positive. I mean, I think Bennetts now just pip everybody else as being the longest serving partner of the championship on elapsed seasons when we take it through to the end of the current term. And it's great. It's not just sponsorship is a very easy, plain vanilla word. I mean, I prefer to use now partnership. We're embedded into what Bennetts do, and Bennetts are embedded into what we do. It's the quality of the events, the presentation. We really enjoy working with Bennetts to event content and create experiences for Bennetts customers. And the flip side, Bennetts enhance our events. I mean, obviously your own personal role on the BikeSocial side of things and the communications network that Bennetts has. It's a very powerful tool. So it's a great signal as well. And this has been all about, this is one of many things that's happened over the winter to symbolise confidence in the championship. And very early on we saw understand that Vision Track at Oxford and McCann's, Cinetic, we've got Tyre coming back with their team as well. Different sponsors from different teams, all showing their commitment, as well as obviously Bennetts as the title partner of BSB. We're retaining Quattro Group as Supersport and another lead partner. picking up new ones all the time. Completely Motorbikes, a big retail group that's growing all the time. They've grown with us, and that's been a success story. And there's other little pockets of sponsors and partners that are out there. It's tough for everybody, but if BSB can be part of their marketing mix, we want to be there to show that what we can do, and not just us, and but the teams as well. It's a highly visible property, with just the media coverage, and obviously the ambition to get the fans back in the tracks. And there whilst there are undoubtedly challenges, there's also an incredible amount, I firmly believe, of pent up demand. And when we get that green light to get moving again, I think outdoor events will be high on the list of what people will want to do, and particularly if there's still a little bit of uncertainty over international travel and international holidays. So BSB staycations will all be for them.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, obviously we had a few limitations last season, but being there firsthand when we've been able to get our customers, VIP sort of safety car laps, pillion laps, VIP hospitality, some of the experience that you guys have been able to get our customers to experience have been like truly fantastic. And I've almost been standing there videoing the experiences, wanting to do it myself. So here's to hopefully many more of them experiences and some successful sponsorship years. We've got 2 more seasons, so that's fantastic. And you touched on it there regarding support classes and the Supersport class. There's been a few changes to that for this season, including the addition of Triumph. So I understand Simon Buckmaster, World Supersport team manager, they're bringing a Triumph factory supported team into that class this year.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a bit of I feel like a one-man band banging on about what's happening to the middleweight class. It's far beyond the commercial and organisational responsibilities. I just love that middle class of racing. I love 250 GPs. Hated it when they disappeared. I've kind of embraced the sort of Supersport and Moto2 and all those sorts of classes, and they're tremendously important. That middle ground. I mean, the age, budget, performance, and everything just makes for the best racing. And obviously, being production derived, it's come up against a bit of a sticky end now. So we've intelligently tried to think around how we can prolong it. We had GP2, which has obviously inflated the grid and given us a prototype feel to the middleweight class, which I think is absolutely right, and it's good that riders have that. It's livened up the a British industry and non-British chassis factories that can put bikes together. That's really important. But we're still, again, it still needs the manufacturer support, and obviously the realities are that the 600 4-cylinder bike is not the weapon of choice in most markets. It's certainly in Europe, with regulatory compliance and insurance and just general purchase volumes. But obviously we started to see things like the R6 only being provided now as a race bike, which is an interesting and quite a necessary development. And then the other bikes we're talking about, manufacturers, just the 600s are kind of still pretty ebullient over in Asia. And the concepts are beginning to sweep in. It's something that both myself and Jonathan Palmer advocated to the FIM as far back as I think 2012, something like that. So look, the writing is on the wall, whether anyone likes it or not, for certain categories of motorcycles as road transport vehicles. There's some bling projects by manufacturers and things like that, but you got to start looking at the realities of life that, motorcycles for sport and recreation use are going to be really one of the last remaining outlets for justification to produce some of these real good pieces of equipment. Yeah. So the motorcycle essentially becomes a bit like a fishing rod. It's a piece of sporting equipment, be it high end, but if the volumes are there, and I think if you combine all the track day and racing use around the world, there is still a pretty good business case for making these. So if there's also underpinned by that a particular market in the world that's got retail demand or street demand, then that's even better. So if, for example, in Asia, the 600 is still seen as a justifiable bike to market for road production, then it just seems entirely logical that enough of them are made, or then they're just like punted around the world into various regions purely for sport, understanding emissions and, you know, the road traffic regulations of the particular country. But this isn't about. This is about a sporting vehicle and a sporting tool. So, you know, that's, I guess, what's happening with R6, and I think was going to happen with the Honda CBR 600 perhaps. But moreover, in that entire class, there's obviously other bikes now that carry the kind of the parameter or the brand of Supersport, and they're, you know, higher CCs. You've got you know, that Ducati the V2.
Yeah.
There's an Envy Augusta model, and obviously there's you've got something like Triumph with a slightly higher capacity bike, but with nowhere to go. So we were always of the mindset that, because a lot of stuff started to change, particularly with the 300 class, the junior Supersport class, where for the first time in, I guess, ever, you've had racing classes that, rather than being just really one or two max CC, a CC limit with a, you know, depending on what you are, obviously like Superbike is 1200 CC for twin cylinder, 1000 CC for four cylinder. So obviously everyone understands that kind of balancing twins for fours. This just takes it that step further, having multiple bikes of multiple configurations. But the difference being now that, you know, even as recently as probably 5 years ago, the balancing would be probably air restrictor, weight and things like that. Whereas now, with essentially control ECU and things like that, you can be quite invasive as to what you want to make the motorcycle do. So you can almost map the performance with a desired kind of curve you want to reach. And that's what we've done. You know, we take the 765 you know, naked bike essentially, and it will have a kit. And so basically, bikes outside of the kind of the current Supersport rules will race to something which we, as a project, we're calling next gen Supersport. And basically, we will prescribe a bike and a kit and a performance kind of metric for it, and it will be sealed. So it's not a case of someone takes it away and starts tinkering with it. As the championship, we will basically not necessarily homologate, but basically approve for use a particular bike excuse me, to a particular standard, and it will be sealed, and that will be what you go racing with. And once we've you know, proved the concept, hopefully, as we will with Triumph, we'll move on to the next model or models in that category.
Fantastic. And I thought a good way to sort of end this podcast would be to maybe ask you a few of the questions we've currently got in our big Bennetts BSB survey that we're running on rewards.bennetts.co.uk at the minute, and we're basically trying to settle those pub arguments that you say, oh, who's the greatest BSB rider of all time, who's had the best livery, or who's been the best team. So I thought we'd ask you if you, or put a couple of these questions to you, okay, and see what your answer would be. So one of the lead questions is, which has been the best BSB livery over the years in your opinion?
Well, it's difficult to know if it's the best, but it's kind of the one that was the most distinctive, and for the right reasons. I mean, 96, I mean, there's probably not that many of us that are around at the time that remember. I mean, it was such a political and operational and seismic change to races that, you know, the previous year, 95, MCRCB was created, which to most people probably means absolutely nothing at all. It stands for the Motorcycle Circuit Racing Control Board. And if I can put it into simplistic terms, it was to motorcycle racing what the Premiership was and is to football. Prior to that, everything had been run very institutionalized. The national governing body, which still is today, but for slightly different parameters, was the ACU. That was run much differently then. It was all essentially elected volunteers and hugely and furiously political. And the racing championships of any particular year largely were at the whim of whoever held the power in the position of being the top man at the ACU. And if the guy got voted out and the next person came in, the next person would generally undo what the other person did just because they didn't like him. And the racetracks were sitting there thinking, you know, this is crackers. We can't actually do anything with this. And I think in 1 year, I mean, there might have been sort of 3 consecutive championships, all with different names. And you couldn't actually tell who the British champion was because everyone who won something claimed they were. And it was just a mess. I mean, we had some stuff that was, was still not bad on TV, like the Super Cup, sponsored by Shell, which was pretty slick, and that was good. But over time, that sort of drifted away, and there was nothing. But meanwhile, on 4 wheels, the British Touring Car Championship was getting something like 40,000 people watching the races at the track, 8 manufacturers, 2-3 million viewers on Grandstand. It was just a 30 to 40 minute highlights program, but it was consistent. You knew when it was, and it was fabulous. And the circuit owners were kind of like, loving the fact that was happening, but everyone kind of intuitively knew that, well, if you do that for car racing, bike should be easy because the product is essentially better. Racing, motorcycle racing is inherently more exciting than car racing. Always has been and always will be. Not arrogant. It's just kind of just how it is. So my mentor, the late Robert Fennell, put together a package in '95 after creating this motorcycle circuit racing control by saying, look, we as the circus are taking this on. You can be at the table or we'll go and do it with somebody else. And the ACU sat on the table, and we now have a very good relationship, and they look after all the licenses still and are the constituents of all club and other racing and all the non-circuit racing side. But the circuit racing side went up to a new level, and we were in control of our destiny. So it's a massive, massive step change. But for 96, that was the big thing. 95 was all about putting the pieces in place, and 96 it was launched. And then to immediately have the first team that was announced was sponsored by Cadbury's Boost, and I'm going with this incredibly long answer to a question now. Cecilia, it had appeared as a privateer team with, I think, Peter Graves on a private Ducati a year before. But this just suddenly was the championship that that I put my heart and soul into, and it was the rebirth of it. And all of a sudden, and I know it sort of rocked the car boys a bit, that in the first year we had there was a Red Bull Kawasaki, there was an Old Spice Ducati, and a Cadbury's Yamaha, and it was like you had to give yourself a bit of a head wobble because it was everything you hoped it would be. And I think that symbolic wow, and I was working in the championship as a weekend warrior. I was still race control and race director or deputy something, but my regular day job was working in the city. I worked in IT and financial services and things like that, and sitting on the train, hearing people talk about, did you see the motorbikes on Grandstand? And it was the Cadbury's bike and things like, I thought, wow, people outside of the sport actually know what it is. And that for me was the first time I'd ever heard anyone talk about motorcycle racing. And obviously, Foggy was just getting big as well. So there was a bit of the knocking on the door, and mainstream were taking a view again. This hadn't been the scene since Barry Sheen in the late 70s. So the Cadbury's revolution was that kind of stands out. Might have not been the best livery, but as the most symbolic livery, I think for me that was the moment.
It's great hearing some of the memories and stuff you shared there. I was 6 years old, so I barely remember those races.
I was only 10, Chris.
I was actually told this week the numbers on the boost bikes were like 80. Well, they were actually, when they tried to label it out, so they did say boost when they were lined up on the front of the grid, or was that a liar?
Yeah, I think the first year it was 3 and 30, Mackenzie and Whittam.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
But yeah, a couple more questions. What has been the best season in your opinion, or what's been your favourite season over the years?
Check it. I mean, 2000 was an incredible roller coaster. I kind of liked it at the time, but now I look back a bit frustrated because obviously the whole Hodgson Walker thing. I think if that had happened in a more modern time, it would have been handled better. And yeah, that kind of just leaves a bit of a sad taste. I mean, for a final round, obviously, Hopper and Hill, it's incredible. The one where Shaky won, where Leon didn't, that was incredible. The Reading year, even the year we've just done, I think the year we've just done was in many ways one of the best, because there was a time not long after talking to you guys, probably about, I think probably mid-April, you thought maybe this is gone. And I said it on the final day of the championship in 2020, like, getting quite emotional then about it. It was like, I think we've lost this. And if we've lost it this year, I ain't so sure it's ever going to come back. Or if it does, it will be a while before it ever comes back into a form that you kind of recognize. And so to actually have done it was pretty satisfying. But even the first year, I could go back to that first year, 96. It was, it was to set, and I think we see it perhaps differently, or I see it differently, because there's always maybe a backstory that I know that isn't perhaps the populist one, where you've been up against other challenges that have been almost overwhelming, and you got it done. There's been years where there's been big emotion in the championship where something's happened. So lots of different things. But I mean, for Action, I'd say 2000 as a whole season, and then get the hump about it.
Oh, we've got loads of other questions on the survey, and if you're listening at home and you want to enter that survey, you actually there's a great competition. One lucky winner will actually get to meet the 2021 Bennetts BSB champion at Brands Hatch, get put up in a hotel. I think, are you going to take them for a safety car lap, Stuart, or take them for a lap around the circuit? I'm sure, hopefully we'll be able to get that included as well.
Yeah, no problem.
There's one of the last questions on the survey is, I'll ask it to you. It says, will you be attending a BSB event this year? It says, I would maybe come for one day, or yes, I would like to make a round. I think there should be a separate column there for yourself. I think you're going to be there every day, every session till late in the evening as well.
Yeah, but the one thing that didn't happen as a result of lockdown was to have a foolproof method that I could actually run the events from home. Although I did have there was a small COVID scare just before the Snetterton round, and I kind of needed to pat myself off and get myself tested again. And we did have to start how much tech do we need to do this remotely? And we got a reasonable way down the line. So there's nothing that beats being there for sure.
Yeah, I think last year, I think that's for a whole separate podcast. The involvement you had to get us racing last year. Obviously, I worked closely with you on stuff, and there were times that you were sort of a one-man band and managed to somehow pull out the season that you did. So I think for myself and from the fans, so thank you for that, because it was it was from what was quite a dark year. BSB was a real good outlet and a real great thing to watch the weekends. But I feel that's a good place to end the podcast. So yes, thanks for joining us. Thanks for sharing some of your stories and getting us excited for what's set to be hopefully a great season this year.
No, I just want to thank everyone for their support. It is a great championship. As the fans, you were incredibly missed in 2020. And as I say, our absolute ambition is to get fans back at the track. We'll be doing everything we can. Some of it's out of our hands, but we will be moving mountains to give the best possible 2021 Bennetts Superbike Championship. That's for sure.